This episode is brought to you by Thorne, the industry leader in nutritional solutions. Now, Thorne is actually trusted by 8 US national teams and championship teams in the NFL, NBA, and Major League, as well as recently becoming the official sports performance nutrition partner of the UFC. So when it comes to supplements, the tactical athlete space and the athletic space need two things. We need efficacy, meaning the products do what they say they're going to do on the label, and then we need to trust the fact that we are not going to fail either athletic drug tests or work-related drug tests. Now, Thorne has actually been around since the 1980s, where they were used by physicians and hospitals for nutritional supplements for the patients. They were so successful that athletic teams and even special operations teams reached out to them and they started supplying them as well. Very recently, they actually opened their doors to the general public. Now, what sets Thorne apart is they manufacture their own products in a state-of-the-art NSF-certified facility in South Carolina. They use only the purest possible ingredients formulated with no stearates or arbitrary fillers in the cleanest manufacturing process. Most of you listening come from a profession where it can take its toll physically and mentally, and many of us are not able to bolster our nutrition purely with the food that we eat. And that's where supplementation comes in. So if you're ready to maximize your health and performance, visit thorne.com, thorne.com. Take a short product quiz to be paired up with the perfect health and fitness supplements. And for you, the audience, if you use the code BTS10, behind the shield 10, BTS10, you will get 10% off your first order. And if you want to learn even more about Thorne, go to episode 323 of Behind the Shield podcast, and you will hear my interview with Wes Barnett and Joel Totoro from Thorne. This episode is sponsored by 511 Tactical, a company that I've used for around 14 years now and continue to use to this day. And they are offering you, the audience, a 15% discount, not on one purchase, but continuously. And I'll give you that code in just a moment. But I want to do a product showcase on their new Atlas sneakers and boots. So I'm a big believer in the fact that footwear can either improve our health or break down our health. And the Atlas sneaker actually has a new foam system that disperses the body weight, whether just the body weight, whether it's a vest and a gun, whether it's EMS bags being carried. And on top of that, they're lightweight, despite having the same protection that's required in the tactical space. So I have a pair of Atlas sneakers myself, and I can attest they're extremely comfortable. On top of footwear, of course, 511 offers a gamut of uniforms and equipment, whether it's plate carriers, backpacks, flashlights, you name it, they have it. All you have to do is go to 511tactical.com and use the code SHIELD15. That's SHIELD 15 at 511tactical.com, and you will save every time you purchase. And to learn more about the company 511 Tactical, you can listen to episode 338 of the Behind the Shield podcast with the CEO, Francisco Morales. Welcome to episode 434 of Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome back on the show Dr. Gregory Smith. Now, Dr. Smith is a physician specializing in pain management in LA, and after seeing the opioid epidemic, began treating his patients with CBD, ultimately setting up his own company, Red Pill Medical. So we discuss a host of topics, some myth-busting when it comes to hemp-based products, to what he's seen in California this last year, the holistic areas that we should be focusing on, mental health, and so much more. Before we get to that conversation, as I say every single week, please just take a moment, go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Each 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, making it more visible to others. And this is a free library of over 430 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you just help pay it forward and share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to everyone else who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Dr. Gregory Smith. Enjoy. Well, Dr. Smith, I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time to come back onto the podcast today.
Well, it's been way too long, and it is an honor to be here, especially for your audience who are hardworking people.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, we tried to meet up in LA, and I think the fact that I was even able to get out there was a miracle in itself, but I know we weren't able to do it face to face. But I think there's a lot of very important conversations, and you have, obviously a unique perspective coming from the more holistic side of medicine and being in California as well. So I'd love to kind of start the conversation with, overall your observation, your experience of this last 12 months, and then we'll obviously segue into some of the holistic versus pharmaceutical things that you've seen.
Yeah. It's really strange because for the last year I have been radio silent. As you probably know, I was doing a lot of media up until about a year ago, and I was silent because I sort of couldn't believe what was happening. But I also wanted to make sure that I got all the information and the data before I spoke out about the controversy that is COVID-19 and the way that it's been handled. But I can tell you that sometimes I wake up and I think that I'm in a bad episode of like The Twilight Zone or some kind of sci-fi movie, because it seems like 2020 dragged on and then it went by really fast. It seemed like it dragged on and then it just, boom, it was over. But we're still, here we are still living it in, late February of 2021. But the bottom line, I think, is, and this is, I try and stay out of the political part of this because it really, to me, doesn't matter the person's libertarian, Democrat, Republican, independent, whatever. I think that almost everybody understands or can see that something isn't quite right with everything that's happened. And I think that the amount of just disinformation, misinformation, omissions, and flat out propaganda that's occurred in the last year has been unprecedented. And what I mean by that specifically is that a lot of the things that we have done to people in our society here is going to cause harm for many, many years to come. So when we look at the way that this thing was handled, and we've had pandemics and infections in the past, and every time in the past successfully, you basically protect the people that are most vulnerable. And everybody else sort of goes about their business using common sense. But this time it was the complete opposite. And we're still in that situation where we're basically sort of quarantining the whole population. And I think everybody's lived through this and has heard lots of different perspectives. But I want to put a few things out there that I think is important for people. And one thing, James, I want to make sure that we do is I'm all about solutions. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of videos and documentaries, many of which have been banned or deplatformed for telling some of the different sides of the story. But I think we have to focus too on the solutions, which I have many for that. But what we've seen here is a situation where we've taken a disease or a virus, COVID-19, and it's been so politicized and so fear-mongered that it's been completely blown out of proportion. And it's not to sound insensitive at all, because to people that have had a loved one that has died or suffered, but there's people that die every day. That's just part of life. But when we look at, let's skip to today. I mean, based on the latest statistics today from Johns Hopkins, it's about 500,000 people that have passed away in the United States from COVID-19. And that's if you believe the numbers. And of course, many of you have heard the high rate of false positives of the test, and the actual person that invented the test apparently said the PCR test wasn't even made for COVID-19. But if you take their numbers at face value, it's 499,000 people. There's 330 million people in this country. So if we had 1% of the population die, just 1%, that'd be 33 million people. So this is a 0.001% death, amount of people that have died, a death rate or survival rate of approaching 99%. So when you start to put it together from a higher perspective, I think that people can see how overblown this has been. And again, not to be insensitive to the people that are sick. But if we had spent time to quarantine or protect the vulnerable, people that have multiple medical issues, cardiovascular issues, diabetes, obesity. These are big ones, and advanced age with illness, because there's a lot of people that are 65, 75, 80 that are very, very healthy. But again, protecting these people, we would have had a much different result. So again, if we look at the statistics, the survival rate is very high. But when you watch the corporate media, what you see is a 24/7 barrage of how bad it is and that the sky is falling and that we're all going to die. And so this instills a tremendous amount of fear, anxiety, and stress in people, which in turn actually weakens the immune system, making these people ironically more susceptible to get sick from a variety of things, not just COVID-19. So I think that we have to put it in perspective for people, and I tell patients to stop watching it, because the constant barrage of it is what is harming people. I just want to bring up something that's very interesting. And if we were to sit someone down and force them, which would be torture in itself, but to force them to watch CNN or some network, 24/7 cable news network, could be any of them. I think CNN to me is the worst, but I mean, could be any of them. 24 hours, just pump them full of medication so they'd stay awake. They would probably have post-traumatic stress disorder after it's over. But in reality, if we actually told the truth and talked about all the great things that are going on this planet, just the fact that the planet still exists, just the fact that you can go out into the park or the forest and see nature and all the beauty around us. If we talked about all the people that are doing great things for other people and neighbors helping other neighbors and all the feel-good stories, the 24/7 newscast would be probably 99% great news. And that little ticker tape at the bottom would probably run for maybe 30, 40 seconds saying all the bad things. But what we have is a complete reversal of this that's presented in a tidy, in a small, tidy package for consumption of all the horrific and bad news that's going on all over the world, condensed into a few minutes, and then they just tell you over and over and over again. They bring on guests. We have Dr. So-and-so, and he's going to tell us how bad it is, and you should wear 2 masks. No, maybe 3 masks. Maybe you should wear a bodysuit. And people are so fearful at this point, doing things that are completely illogical. There's a whole mass debate that we can get into, because I'm familiar with both sides of the literature. But I think that common sense has gone out the window. Apparently common sense isn't common anymore. When you see people driving in a car with the windows up and a mask on, when you see people running, no one within 100 yards of them in any direction, and they have a mask on, this is nonsense. And I don't understand where that part is coming from. You can make arguments for other times to wear a mask, but again, this is coming from the place where people have been fear-mongered to the maximum. And I see it in almost not only just patients, but almost everyone that I know, that their baseline stress levels are high. And all these things actually contribute to making you sicker, not just with COVID-19, but regular influenza, bacterial infections, just mental and psychological disease and harm. So my overall view of this is that it's been completely politicized. It's been completely overblown in terms of the deadliness and the infectious rates. I mean, there's been studies that shown that it is actually less infectious than influenza, but you would never see that. You would think that obviously people think they can go outdoors, especially here in Southern California. It's absolutely the worst, where people apparently feel they can walk outside in fresh air and somehow contract the virus if they don't have a mask and gloves and all this on. So there's a lot more to say about that, but I'll stop. It's your show, so I want you go ahead and ask me a question.
No, but I'm we're having this conversation because obviously, that we talked before, I use CBD on a daily basis. You went from the pain medicine side and seeing the opioid crisis and bringing holistic solutions to that. Therefore, you clearly, care about human life. So it's people like you who's not opinion, whose work, what you see I value, because we get the other side of the story. We get bombarded with, this is the worst thing that's ever happened, shut down the planet. And what drives me crazy is when people try and say, well, hey, what about obesity? What about some of these, underlying health conditions? What about the health of our nation contributing to the higher death toll that this virus is exposing? Why are we not having that conversation? And I think what's been so irresponsible about the reporting is it's not even not mentioned, it's actually suppressed. It's literally seen as heresy if you have the audacity to say that the 400-pound patient died from a cardiac-related disease and not COVID just because they tested positive for COVID.
That's right. That's right. The point you brought up is very, very important. This whole crisis has also shined a light on just the poor health of the American population, and the vast majority of these people that have passed away have multiple problems, and mainly related to obesity, which can cause contributes to type 2 diabetes and contributes to heart disease and vascular diseases and all these other problems, and that isn't emphasized at all. You just get another person died, and when a person does die that's younger or seemingly healthier, then that case, that red herring, and there could be other factors, but that red herring is really emphasized to, again, scare the public. They can say, see, a 22-year-old dude died from it. It's not just old people, or this teenager died from it. And then everybody goes, oh my God, kids and teenagers can die from it too. But when you do the actual numbers, it is absolutely minuscule. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if you're healthy and under the age of 70, again, approaches 99% survival rate, not death rate, but survival rate. So we have caused unbelievable financial ruin, especially to small business owners, restaurants, things of that nature. We have caused incredible amounts of stress on the healthcare and first responders community. Let me just throw this stat out there. And a lot of people may not know this, but the suicide rate among physicians was already about double than that of the general population. So that's most people don't realize that, but doctors kill themselves normally at a rate twice than the normal population. Since COVID-19 has started, we've seen an uptick in physician suicide, other healthcare workers suicide, depression, anxiety, all these things are way up. And then when they look at the general population, the people that are, we'll pop up there. The people that make under $40,000 a year versus people that make over $100,000 a year, the numbers are tremendous towards those people that are in the lower income brackets that are having problems across the board, anxiety, depression, suicide, because they aren't insulated from all this isolation as people are that have resources and money.
Yeah, well, you mentioned first responders too, and obviously this applies to doctors and nurses and other people that were basically shift workers through this whole thing. But when this first started, one of my huge concerns was because of sleep deprivation, because of the way we work. I know, from all the experts I've spoken to, that our immune systems are already broken down. I'm very fortunate. I'm 2 years retired and sleep in my own bed every day, so mine should be pretty good again now. But I was very concerned about the first responders and the medical personnel because they were not only on the front line, but also much more vulnerable because of the way they worked. Is that something that you've seen through your lens too?
Absolutely. The extra hours working, the stress of the situation, seeing people sick and seeing people die, feeling helpless and somewhat hopeless because, again, people in this community their world is very skewed. I mean, I know that I remember clearly years ago when I was in medical school and I was rotating through transplant surgery and brain surgery or neurosurgery. I didn't see the light of day for 30 days because we would start rounds at 5 a.m. and we would finish at 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And I remember how down and depressed I felt. And then I realized I literally had not been outside during the daylight for a month. So this is the same. And so my whole world was doom at that time because that's all I see. So when first responders are constantly responding to emergencies and horrific situations, that sort of closes down and becomes their world. And again, the stress and the anxiety all weaken your immune system, not to mention the fact that people are concerned about bringing something home to their families. I know people that have literally isolated from their family because they're still seeing patients or whatever. They don't even, they've rented apartments or sleep in a part of the house that's sort of isolated. It just depends on the level of concern or paranoia, however you look at it. Huge stressors. So yes, this is why it's affecting people in these communities really, really, really bad, really devastating situation.
Yeah. Well, another observation I've made recently is the way that this was presented to us, nationally, internationally, whatever you want to look at it. And it's about empowerment as well. So the way that I, perceive the way the information's been put out is wear a mask, socially distance, stay at home, lockdown. And I understand trying not to overwhelm certain areas. Now, I think there's a lot of areas that wouldn't be overwhelmed personally, but there are some that are definitely more vulnerable with a very, very dense population. But what that didn't do was empower the people, the community, to take control of their own health. And I really wish that it had been framed the other way. Assume that you are going to get COVID. So think about what you're eating. Try and get outside, get some daylight, get some exercise. Think about hydration. Think about the quality of your sleep. Take CBD, for example, so that, now you're bolstering and preparing your body for not only COVID, but whatever else might, come your way. But I think the way it was framed was, oh, you don't have to do anything. Just wear a mask and stay inside and you're doing your part for your country.
Right. And that's one of the things that the false sense of security of mask wearing, which up until last year, pretty much every study ever done showed masks aren't effective, but all of a sudden there's this huge outpouring of literature in 2020 saying the masks do work. But the bottom line here is that you're absolutely right about being healthy. I think people have to realize how amazing their immune system is. Our immune system can literally fight off everything. And these news reports showing the big bad virus, it takes away people's personal power. And one of the things that I'm going to want to do for your listeners is I want to, and we'll go over this later, is I'll give them an email to send to, but they can I have a whole immune boosting protocol, which includes CBD that's free. I give it to everybody that can show people how to support their immune system even more to make it stronger. Because I don't fear viruses and getting sick. I rarely get sick. And I'm not saying that as from an egotistical standpoint. I'm saying that because I make a point on a day-to-day basis to do things to keep my immune system strong, because I don't want to get sick from anything. Too busy. I got too many things I want to do, so I don't want to be laid up in bed. And I think if people know how incredible their immune system is, how incredible the body is, that the body is light years away from above and beyond any technology we've ever invented as humans. And if you give it what it needs and support it when you're in stressful situations, again, like healthcare workers and first responders that are under tremendous stress, and business owners, people dealing with tremendous financial stress, this is the time where you do the deep breathing, the meditation, you do things that support your psychological and physical health. This is very, very important. And I want to make sure that we give people the tools to do that.
Yeah, well, I think another important point you touched on was the fear element. And I don't think people realize that the more scared we are, obviously it's going to disrupt our sleep, but also just overall, we're actually breaking down our immune system with the stress. So by the fear mongering, not the middle of the road sensible medical community, but especially the kind of media element and the extreme voices, we're actually making our men and women even more vulnerable and more likely to have a more severe reaction if they do get this virus.
That's correct. And we have to understand that fear is a great marketing tool. It's been used forever. And even in things that you don't even think about in regular marketing campaigns for whatever, a car or something, they often use a negative to get people to act. And so this is on steroids from what we've been told by the corporate media and different, so-called leaders and people fear mongering us, because fear sells and fears get gets people's attention. But the negative things it does is it shuts down logical and rational thinking in the brain. When someone is paralyzed with fear, they don't think normally. Again, if people weren't in fear, they would never be wearing a mask in a car with their spouse with the windows up. They would never be wearing a mask when they're walking. I've been in hiking trails and there's no one around. I mean, I'd see 1, 2 or 3 people for a half a mile, and it was hot. This was last summer, wearing a mask outside. That's when you actually should be breathing fresh air. That's when you should be taking in nature. That actually strengthens your immune system. But fear shuts down logic, and that's what you see people doing illogical things out in public at this point. And that includes what they're doing and the mass shaming and all the other things that you've seen, on television.
Well, as I mentioned before, you were definitely a voice in the opioid epidemic and, the holistic treatment of. What have you viewed yourself in the California area as far as mental health and addiction, just in the general population this last year?
Well, not just in California, but everywhere, because I've deal with people in different states, but the suicide rate and the overdose rate has gone crazy. I actually know 2 people personally in the last 6 months who had their millennial age children, I shouldn't say, or adult children die from overdose. And they had both been sober for years. One of them was a doctor's son, and they'd been sober for years. But when the lockdown started, the meetings, whether it's NA or AA or just support groups and the community was stopped. Those things were closed down. People lost their income. Some of them had to move back home. They felt isolated and lonely, and all these things and boredom are triggers for addiction and overdose. And so sometimes when people have been sober for a period of time and they resume, they may take the same amount that they got when they were doing it all the time, and that can be a functional overdose, and people die in their sleep. So both of these people didn't commit suicide, they just overdosed. They weren't trying to kill themselves. But this is a sad situation, but it has been very, very devastating. In the population of people that I see and other colleagues of mine see, it's the amount of depression and anxiety is through the roof. I'd say 80 to 85% of the people that I normally interact with are in that category. It's heightened. It's only about maybe 10 or 15% of people that have done a lot of their own research that don't feel that way and that are thriving in this situation.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is these are all the unseen death tolls, this, and, obviously there's, I hear a lot of reports of domestic abuse, whether it's parents and children, whether it's parent on parent or, spouse on spouse. But then you have, the people that I view through my eyes here that I knew were finally in the gym, finally getting control of their food. They were kind of that middle group that was kind of teetering on the motivational seesaw. And the wind's completely out of the sails now, and they're back at home, back not moving, back eating poor food. So that's going to have, an impact. Then you have the chest pains and the cancer patients that I hear didn't go to the ER because they were too scared that, now it's too late for them. So I think if we tally up all those, that's really going to offset, some of the fear mongering of the virus on its own.
That's right. I had a patient of mine, a close one, and I take care of their son and daughter too. And the mother, this is 3 months ago, the mother died of an asthma attack. She has asthma. Her daughter came over her house and saw that she was struggling, called the ambulance. They came and they gave her a breathing treatment, but they suggested she come to the hospital. But she was so afraid of COVID-19, even though she didn't have it, she didn't want to go to the hospital. So she got another attack later that night in the middle of the night and died. So this is again the negative impact here. People afraid to go to their healthcare providers for normal type problems that they would normally see someone for, that's festering at home. And this is the unseen death toll that no one reports on, because I can tell you that it dwarfs what's going on with COVID-19, but that doesn't really serve the narrative, so it's not really reported on, and that's a shame. So people really need to do their own investigation and use some critical thinking here. But what you said about the physical fitness is true. You close all the gyms. It's almost like you want people not to be healthy and get sick, because the gyms and the nutrition and the trainers, this was all getting our population healthier, and it's all gone the opposite direction, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the immunity protocol. So are you able to tell us kind of some of the things that are on that list?
Absolutely. One of the things that I personally take every day. Well, I'll tell you, I'll just say this is what I personally take every day. And this was pre-COVID. This has nothing to do with COVID. But if I tell people to take more and different things if they actually have an infection. But nanosilver, specifically nanosilver 10 parts per million, because that's the one that's been researched. It's a home run for keeping people. It works. I mean, again, gets a little controversial. People say certain things aren't proven. There's research out there that supports it in terms of its ability to help people be less susceptible to viral illnesses and bacterial illnesses. Curad Band-Aids, I believe, started putting silver on their Band-Aids for children years ago because they know that it works. I also take high doses of vitamin D3. I mean, the real key for vitamin D3 helping people are the big doses. As you get up to higher and higher doses, and what I normally take is 15,000 units Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I get the little 5,000 units small, and it's cheap, very inexpensive, and take about 45,000 units per week, sometimes more. It just depends on the situation, and it affects, I think, somewhere around 80 to 100 different genes. I mean, when you get to the higher doses, it has all kinds of effects that are positive, including really helping the immune system. I take CBD, obviously, every day. CBD has multiple effects, which you could do a whole show on, but it supports the immune system in many ways and does all kinds of other benefits depending on what specifically type of CBD formula you're taking. I think that zinc with the copper is important, and I think that I believe it's a 15-to-1 ratio, zinc to copper. If you take just a bunch of zinc, it's possible you could end up having a copper issue because they both compete. They're similarly charged. So zinc, copper. I get into other stuff if people feel like iodine and things like that. Now, if people are feeling sick or if they're more susceptible, they're sick, they're in poor health, and I'll talk to them about taking beta glucans and all kinds of things above and beyond. But what I just told you is what I take a bunch of other things too. But ashwagandha, I think, is a home run for stress. I think that's, if anybody has just a baseline stress, then I'm taking ashwagandha. And again, you have to make sure you're taking the right doses. And that's one of the things I emphasize is that when you look at the one of the biggest problems with the supplement industry in general is that you'll get the marketing combination capsules and you look at the list and it's got 20 different things. It's got vitamin D and C and A, and you're like, oh, this is great in one capsule. And here's the problem. That's not going to do much, just like multivitamins don't do much, because the individual components are good and maybe have science behind them, but it's the milligram, it's the amount. Like, for example, curcumin or turmeric, which is great for anti-inflammatory, it's not going to do anything at the dose that most of these capsules come in, because if you're not at 600,000 milligrams, it doesn't really do much. It's just too low of a dose. So you get these combinations. Well, it has turmeric in it, and it's got this, it's got that. And then you look at the label, and it's got 50 milligrams. It doesn't do anything. It's like spitting in the ocean. So I really think it's not just important what supplements you take for your immune system or any health reason. You have to understand how much you're supposed to be taking. And that's hard to do, because how would the lay population even know this? Certainly most physicians have no idea about the supplements and nutrition and things of that nature. But those are some of the things. And like I said, what I send to people is a whole thing, a list and a regimen, how to take it. I even provide links that I get if this is not a money thing, some of the links that I provide specifically for nanosilver, it's just a company I think that does a great job. So when I send it to them in PDF form, they can't click it. But if it's an email, they can actually click the links, and it takes them right to where they can get it. Some of it you can get on Amazon or iherb.com. And like I said, I don't do affiliate links, so I don't have any money that comes to me if they click through. I'm just trying to get people the right information. The CBD obviously is opposite. If they get CBD from my CBD company, that there is benefit there for the company, but all the other stuff, I just give people the information. And then I tell people that probably the most above and beyond everything I've just said, I believe wholeheartedly that the single most important thing a person can do for themselves mentally and physically is meditation on a daily basis, even if it's for a very short period of time, 10 or 15 minutes. A little bit longer is better. But because quieting your mind and stilling your mind and letting that energy flow through you is beyond anything in terms of good for you from a physical and emotional, mental standpoint. And so those are the things that I tell my patients and I tell people that I care about, and I care about everybody. So that's why I'm saying it here on the air.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you know, I've taken Red Pill for a couple of years now. I think our first conversation was episode 97 for everyone, by the way, listening. So that was well over 2 years ago. But yeah, I mean, your gold daily, I swear by, and for all the first responders, I'd love to dig into it again. But, it's 0 THC, so it's safe for any workplace drug tests as well. And then Thorn. I don't know if you ever use Thorn in the medical setting, but they're a great, great company for actually getting what you're supposed to be getting in a supplement. I just had a guest on, excuse me, who is from a company called Amp Human that does vitamin D transdermally. It's a cream. So it absorbs that way, so it bypasses the whole GI tract. And, I've just started using that myself. But again, that's another way of getting those higher doses without, having to take it orally.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Thorn, because when people have been under chronic stress, a lot of times their adrenals are shot, and the formulation I like for adrenal support, or just plain adrenal gland, taking the gland itself, is the Thorn product. So it's funny you say that, but that's another supplement that people that have just been through the ringer with all the stress is I put them on an adrenal gland or adrenal support to help boost that up.
Beautiful. That's why there's this cross-pollination with all these great companies. Well, staying with the CBD then. So it's still such a new kind of discovery. I know that the cannabinoids were really kind of found in the 90s. So I know we talked about it on episode 97, but I'd love to kind of revisit it, but with any other information. So if you could educate us again on what the cannabinoid system is in the body, and then let's go into all the amazing things that I've seen personally CBD does as far as holistic healing and prevention.
Well, 2 years is there's a lot that's happened, a lot, but and all good. But in terms of CBD, the first thing I want everybody to understand is that when you see CBD, it's usually more than that, unless you're using a product that's just isolated. So CBD stands for cannabidiol. It comes from cannabis, just like marijuana. So cannabis is hemp and marijuana. So if you then go down the hemp pathway, that's where you get CBD. You go down the marijuana pathway, you also get CBD, but the plants produce a high THC, low CBD, versus hemp is producing high CBD, low THC. So that's sort of the pathway they go. So when people talk about cannabis, it's all cannabis, but you make the distinction of hemp-derived CBD versus marijuana CBD, because that's where the legality comes in. So the government says that CBD that comes from a marijuana plant, the same exact CBD that comes from the hemp plant, is federally illegal, still Schedule 1, still saying that methamphetamine and cocaine is safer on the schedule, believe it or not, because they're Schedule 2. That's CBD coming from marijuana. You can't use it because it's fairly illegal. If it comes from the hemp plant, and if the concentration is less than 0.3% in your formula, or dry weight of the raw, then that is federally legal. Now there's still about 3 states, I think it's South Dakota and Idaho, another one that still have some fuzzy CBD laws, but in the other 47 states, it's also no issue. But federally, there's no issue transporting it. And that's the big change from just a few years ago, is that before that 2018 Farm Bill was signed, it was still somewhat problematic putting that stuff in the mail. You had to use private carriers like UPS or FedEx. Now you can mail it. So that is what CBD is. So they come from even the plants look different. Industrial hemp is very tall, 8, 10, 12, feet, big rockets up in the air. Marijuana plants tend to be more shrubbery looking, so smaller, although you can make them grow bigger. I'm just giving you generalizations. So very different. Now, when you get formulas and something that says it's broad spectrum or isolate or full spectrum. So isolate means that it's just that isolated compound. So when you get that capsule or cream, it is just pure CBD or 99.9% CBD and nothing else. And you can get other isolates, by the way. You can get CBC now or even CBN, but CBD is the most common as an isolate that people see. Broad spectrum, which is what I prefer for most people, is where you have CBD as the dominant cannabinoid, but you have a spectrum. And here's where the magic starts to take place. The spectrum meaning other cannabinoids. Maybe there's some CBG or CBC or one of other cannabinoids in there, and those all have their own little effects on the body. And so you can start to tweak that spectrum to get a CBD to a product to help you sleep versus for pain versus for anxiety. And this is why I started Red Pill in 2016, because we really wanted to make symptom specific formulas as opposed to take our CBD, it works for everything, which is, what pretty much everyone else does. It's like, just take CBD. Well, it's more than that. And then you have the terpenes. And terpenes, people, if you've ever had essential oils or colognes, whatever, some of the smells, there's terpenes in that. So terpenes are responsible for the smell and look and color and all that of cannabis, the distinct smells and everything. But what's been discovered in recent years is that the terpenes themselves have tremendous medicinal properties. In fact, there's ongoing studies for some of the terpenes for depression, which have been an absolute home run preliminary results in terms of its treatment of depression without all the horrific side effects that we see from the SSRIs and other prescription antidepressants that reap havoc in people. These things do it naturally at a very, very high level. So one of the things that I think is very, very interesting is that if you really want to make a formula that helps people sleep, you can focus on that spectrum and hype up certain things to get them to sleep better without a hangover effect. It gets really scientific. And so this is when you start to educate yourself more about CBD, you can make better choices in terms of what to get, what to use and how much to use and all that. The next thing is the absorption and the route of delivery. So when it first became more and more popular, taking the little droppers, the little tinctures was really the most common. That's starting to fall more and more out of favor. I've never been a big fan of tinctures. And again, I'm talking about for the medical part. If a person's taking it just to be taking it or recreationally or whatever, that's a different thing. But I've always liked capsules or pills, creams, those type of things where you could really have a better measured delivery in terms of what you're giving a person, so you can get consistency of what you're taking. And then also tinctures by definition have alcohol in them. And so you have a lot of people that they're in the addiction community don't want to use those because of alcohol. And at that point, you'd have to go to an emulsion, which looks like a tincture. It's just usually a lot more expensive. So you can take it by different routes. You can smoke it, which gives it to you really fast. But again, there's problems with red eyes. You want to smell like that because you can smoke hemp. Smokable hemp has become much bigger in the past few years. But by and large, most people prefer, because of convenience, to use capsules and creams, and I think that's the way and I think that's the trend that's going to continue. Now, to go back to the science a little bit, and please, James, feel free to butt in if you want me to go a different way, but I just want to talk about the endocannabinoid system, and as I think that's very important for people to have that knowledge about that. So the endocannabinoid system, which really has to be given a lot of credit to Dr. Rousseau, who's done so much research and discovery on this, and actually came up with the term of endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. So what that is in our bodies, we all have receptor systems. You have the neurologic system, the cardiovascular, immune system. They all have receptors in those systems that communicate information. And if you add all those receptors up, the endocannabinoid system still has more receptors than all the body's receptors, the system's receptors combined. And this is because it acts like a regulator of the receptors. So it keeps the body in balance. I'm simplifying a little bit here, but let's say that if a person was making too much of a hormone, the endocannabinoid system would say, okay, you need to make less hormone or you need to make more hormone. Again, assuming that the person was able to make hormone. If a woman had her ovaries removed or something like that, it's different. But if your body is intact, the endocannabinoid system can help keep everything in balance. This is why what we saw early back in 2015, before I incorporated it, and we were still doing research, and all through 2016, actually into 2017, I was amazed at, because my specialty is pain and addiction, so I was really focused on those two areas. But when I was giving some of our preliminary stuff for chronic pain, all of a sudden we see their blood pressure or their diabetes normalize, and nothing else had changed. And we're like, why is this happening? And this is because that CBD is going in and fixing other, or I shouldn't say fixing, but balancing other systems that are out of balance. Because most people that are sick because something is wrong. But our conventional medical system, what does it do? It gives you a pill or a Band-Aid. Your blood pressure's high? Okay, let's give you a pill. Well, it's normal now. Great, keep taking the pill. Well, no, that's not great, because why are you hypertensive in the first place? Fix the root cause is the bottom line here. So when people come and they're on all these medications for cholesterol and blood pressure and can't breathe well and their heart's bad, all these different things, right? And they start taking CBD and they start feeling better, they're able to sometimes, again, should be done with someone that knows what they're doing. You're able to walk them down or sometimes even off a lot of these other medications. They're actually having all kinds of other negative side effects. So this is the endocannabinoid system and the magic of it, because when we take CBD and other cannabis products, it has effect on that system. Now, notice I said endo, which means in. We make our own cannabinoids. We make cannabinoids called anandamide and 2-AG. There's a few others that are somewhat controversial if they're truly endocannabinoids or not, but those are the two that everyone recognizes. So those, we actually make those in our body. So we are already had a cannabinoid system. It just wasn't discovered until the 90s. Now, I think about this for a minute. Most people can relate to pain. Like if you've ever gotten in an accident in skiing and you twist your ankle or break a leg, or in a car accident and you have tremendous pain, and people want medication for that. I would, if I was in a car accident and my leg was snapped in two, I'd want the morphine because you're in pain. Now, contrast that with you're in the kitchen slicing up a tomato and making food because you've been locked in your home for the last few years, so you've got nothing better to do but to make some food. So, and you slice your finger and it hurts. You don't go take morphine for that. You put some pressure, you put a Band-Aid on it, some alcohol, whatever. Because you know mentally that your body is going to fix that. And what happens is your body releases chemicals called enkephalins and endorphins that are sort of natural painkillers. And it goes and soothes that area and inflames and starts to fix it, and the pain goes away. But when your system is overwhelmed, if I came in that same kitchen, took a hatchet and whacked off your hand, your natural pain chemicals is not enough to take care of that pain. You need intervention. So this is the way I look at the endocannabinoid system, and supporting it with things like CBD is that stress and anxiety and all the things that's going on in life right now, more than ever. I mean, whatever I've said in the past is amplified beyond right now because of our current situation. Your endocannabinoid system needs help and support, just like your body would need help and support with pain management if someone cut your hand off versus a slice of the finger, which would be maybe in times that things were going really well in your life. So that's sort of an overview of it. And James, I'm going to stop so you can ask me something more specific if there's more I need to talk about on that.
No, I think it was great, but I want to add my own perspective to kind of, piggyback onto what you said for my own personal, anecdotes from my family. So I started taking it a couple years ago. I take it every day. I had it just before we sat down, actually. But to give you some kind of success stories, purely like I have witnessed it myself. My son struggled with wheezing. He wasn't actually asthmatic. It was more of a kind of upper airway inspiratory wheeze, but it was very much like asthma, whereas it would kind of be allergy related if there were pollen in the air, that kind of thing. And I started him on CBD a couple years ago, and it literally went away. The only time he ever even gets slightly wheezy is, if he has some sort of, chest cold or something that exasperates it. My wife suffers from very, very, severe is the wrong word, but that definitely significant highs and lows as far as, anxiety and depression. And it absolutely, turned the volume down to 2 on those. And then a friend of mine I used to work with, he contacted me and said, hey, can you tell me about that CBD? My mother is having horrendous hip pain, and she's gone from being ambulatory to being bedridden. So I sent her to you guys, and he messaged me about a month later and said, hey, just want to let you know she's not only out of bed, but she's now able to go to physical therapy. And I think that underlines to me what CBD does. In the fire service, if you crash your car, as you said, and your leg's hanging off, well, what I've got to do is stabilize your car before I cut you out. So we use what's called cribbing. We take pieces of wood and we fill all the voids so the car can't shift. And that's what I see CBD doing to the human body. It doesn't mean that it's going to fix the car, but it gives you the tools to then have the energy and the resources to address those underlying issues. So it wasn't CBD lying in bed that fixed his mother. It was the fact that she was able now to go to PT, address the underlying muscle imbalances and spinal issues that she was having, that then, truly started fixing the issues. So that's why I shout from the rooftops about CBD is it's not a magic pill. But for example, with us, if you take a firefighter that can't sleep and now they're able to sleep, well, that's going to start fixing everything that they were suffering from before.
I couldn't agree more. It's great what you said, and you're right. It's all about the body. And again, people need to understand how powerful they are as beings, as people, both physically, emotionally, and spiritually. We're very powerful. And if you give the body what it needs, it will fix it. So I think that this is why I've been so hard on pharmaceuticals for the last decade and the films and all that, because I've seen firsthand the harms. And you're talking to a person that was, at high level institutions. I mean, I graduated from a top 5 medical school, went to UCLA after that, and was director of pain, Harvard UCLA pain. So I was doing all that, published a lot of academic papers back then, but I saw what I thought I'd become a doctor for. People, are we actually getting people better? Or are we just putting out a bunch of scientific papers and coming up with new medications and things like that? And the more that I saw this, the more I realized I had to unlearn a lot of this stuff, because we basically were trying to say, to me, I think conventional medicine's often trying to say, we know more than the body. We know more than nature. We can do it better. And it's not true. What we can do better is help the body when it needs our help. Exactly what you just said. And then everything falls into place. When people aren't sleeping at night, everything starts to erode. There's nothing you do. You can do everything better when you sleep better. Everything, whether it's focus, whether it's perform physically, mentally. So we have a complete epidemic with insomnia in this country. And what do most people get? They get, the Ambiens and Lunestas and these tranquilizing type pills that do not fix the problem, do not restore sleep cycles. Do some people sleep on them? Yes. But do other people sleepwalk and do crazy things? Absolutely. I've had patients that were on Ambien that went and shopped at a Walmart at 1 a.m. and came home and put the groceries on the counter, and the next morning got up and saw that and looked at the receipt and had no idea they even left their house. and they lived alone. And this one lady lived alone, so it had beer. I had one guy that went to a 7-Eleven, walked in to buy beer and cigarettes at 2 or 3 in the morning. He was completely naked, didn't even know it, was asleep on Ambien. So I'm not trying to.
That's crazy.
but this is what you see, and these things are not told to the public. They're just like, oh, Ambien helps you sleep, and there are patients that successfully use it. And I begrudgingly, I have very few people I've written that to, but there's one patient that's taken it for decades and just can't live without it just because his brain is so wired towards it. But 99% of everyone else, I get them off of those kind of things because it's not good for you. So you're right. It helps the body do what it's supposed to do.
Well, it's interesting you said about Ambien because I had another guest on several times now as well. His name's Dr. Kirk Parsley, and he's was a Navy SEAL, went to become a functional medicine doctor, went back to the SEAL teams, and very long story short, realized that a whole bunch of his men, their blood work was in the toilet, and he figured out after about a year that they were all on Ambien, so consequently realized it was sleep deprivation. And as he says, Ambien makes you unconscious, it doesn't put you into deep restorative sleep. And so another thing that's really emerged, and he kind of turned me onto this initially, but now I'm seeing it in not only my community, my professions, but even in civilians, is this new addiction to testosterone, exogenous testosterone. And again, here we are with men in their 30s who their testosterone's in the toilet. And I know in my professions and the shift workers, there's absolutely sleep deprivation doing that. So obviously the real answer is to get these men and women more sleep, not to make them addicts of testosterone the rest of their life. But what are you seeing through your lens as far as that?
Well, one of the things with testosterone that's interesting, and it's true for women, and maybe even more so, is that low testosterone levels actually amplify and cause chronic pain. So a lot of times, and it's been hard to get the insurance companies to understand and see this, but because it's hard sometimes to get hormone panels and all that approved, complete hormone panels. But yeah, that is a huge problem. And I've seen more and more people in their 20s, 30s, ages you would not expect them to have a testosterone levels, have unbelievably low testosterone levels. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. But the low levels, and people think of testosterone strictly from a sexual standpoint, but it has other problems when it's low like that. The irritability, the pain. If someone has pain, it really exacerbates chronic pain. Sometimes if you normalize those testosterone levels, their pain gets better. And I have supplemented people, but it's been for short periods of time, because what happens when they get on these supplements and chronically is it shuts down the person's ability to make their testosterone, and then they become dependent on it, because if you stop it, then they crash. This is pretty much the cycle you see with most drugs. So you have to be really careful when you supplement it, but you just don't want to have it be the answer. You want to get to the root cause.
Yeah, absolutely. Which again, for me, if you bring in, the red pill, and then this Navy SEAL actually has a supplement that again has, magnesium and vitamin D and some of these things that initiate the sleep cascade. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So there are some very holistic ways of us getting better sleep, therefore elevating our steroids, our steroids, that was a Freudian slip, our testosterone naturally without having to initially go to exogenous.
That's correct. Yeah, I agree.
Well, I really want to answer one question before, and I want to explore THC for a little bit, but the thing that I see over and over and over again, as you touched on earlier, that terrifies people about CBD is they think it's weed, they think it's marijuana, and they immediately have this knee-jerk to, well, I'm going to fail my drug test at work. It's not worth risking my job for. So I, obviously I've taken it. You guys have sent me the third-party testing. I even deliberately took it right before a drug screening for the volunteer position I took as a firefighter after I retired, and was completely fine. So what would you say to the audience to kind of educate them, not persuade them, educate them on why the zero THC red pill is completely safe for anyone who gets drug screened at work? Well,
there are situations where zero THC products work best, sometimes micro THC, and then sometimes larger amounts of THC, depending on the situation. But again, if someone is working at a job, a first responder, a police officer, firefighter, these type where you just have you cannot have any chance of testing positive, you do want to have a 0 THC product. And so if there's not any in there, it's not going to come out on your test. And as far as CBD being dangerous, even the World Health Organization, and every 2 years they do this worldwide search of literature. And they've even concluded, because depending on who you listen to, you'll still see people getting on national television and saying that it's addictive, which is ridiculous. So the truth of the matter is there is zero addictive potential for CBD. In fact, I actually use it to help people with addiction problems. Zero risk. For THC, there is some tiny controversy. By and large, in my opinion, 100%, it is not addictive. However, there's a psychological component when you have people that are super heavy weed smokers that can start to change the dynamic of the brain. So there is some issue there, but this is not really the issue for people that are taking this for medicinal reasons anyway. So very, very safe. World Health Organization has also concluded, which everyone else concluded years before this, that it is a legitimate pain reliever and an anti-inflammatory. That's as far as they've gone so far. Now, it has worked in all kinds of situations. I mean, there's case reports and studies, and in my own patient population that working in diabetes and Parkinson's and dementia, all kinds of fibromyalgia, and the list goes on and on and on. And it was originally heavily studied for irritable bowel syndrome and other GI disorders. So home runs for those type of things, for irritable bowel and things like that. But as far as the testing positive, super safe. You won't test positive if you're on a true 0 THC product. And James just mentioned the third-party testing, or it's called a COA, or certificate of analysis. That's very important, because if you buy it from whoever, you want proof that that what's in the bottle there is a certificate. Because if you have a problem on your end, you need something to back up to know that you're taking what they're saying is in that bottle. Because there are people that have produced fake COAs. We've been sent fake COAs when we're working with farms and things. So you have to be very, very careful with who you're buying from. That's why, again, we wanted to do this on a medical side. We've been on the medical side of it the whole time, and that's the reason why, because this is important for people that are working in those type of jobs.
Yeah, just to add to that too, correct me if I'm wrong, your hemp is organic as well. So that spectroscopy is not only verifying the quality and the purity of your product, but also there's no pesticides or anything in there too.
That's correct. And the term you have to use is organically grown. I guess the government still doesn't allow you to say it's organic hemp, but it's organically grown. And so one of the things I did in 2019 is I wanted to drill down even more in terms of our sourcing, and get direct and cut out the middleman, direct relationships with the farmers. And so there's farms that I've gone to that we work with where I physically out there in the fields, and it's hard work. These guys are out there picking weeds because they don't use pesticides on acres, and they just look for, you can look as far as I can see, and all these people out there. And I remember I asked the main guy, I said, what do they do? He said, they're picking weeds. It's organic. And I'm like, oh, that's right. I mean, I just, when I think of picking weeds, I think about my garden, right? I don't think about picking weeds by hand, on acres and acres. But yes, absolutely organically grown and non-GMO, all those things for sure.
Beautiful. All right. Which is why, for everyone listening, you don't pay me anything. This is the product because I knew who you were, and this is your company, and just, the way you've described how it's safe for us job wise, how it's clean as far as the pesticides. I mean, there's so many CBDs. You can go to every, gas station and head shop now and have shelves and shelves. So people need to know which one to trust. So this is why, I talk about Red Pill. It's purely because I trust it myself and my family.
It's very nice. I mean, I can tell you that, and I know it sounds corny, but it is the obvious, it's the God's truth that hearing people successfully getting treatment with this stuff and helping them is the best thing. It makes my day every time I hear it. And especially when I've dealt with some people with some really severe problems, some children with cancer and other things. And when it's helped in that regard, and again, I'm not I'm saying, I'm not telling people it's a cure for cancer, but it certainly is something that should be utilized. And that's a different subject. But when I see those things happen, a particular gentleman in New York City a year ago, that had really end-stage Parkinson's that was really helped from some high doses of a formula. These things really make me feel good. So I'm glad to hear that about your family. That's very, very important to me.
Yeah, well, and then it's an important conversation to have, and like you said, it's almost like heresy to talk about nutrition or CBD when it comes to cancer. I mean, there's such a vice grip, I think, on that, where it's chemo or radiotherapy. Those are your two options. So I had Dr. Bonnie Goldstein on the show probably about 6 months or so ago, and she's successfully treated a lot of people, especially pediatric patients, with not just CBD but THC, a lot of THC. So I'd love to just open Pandora's box for a moment. What are some of the things that community as a whole, you're not saying it's a cure for cancer, but there's many layers to that. What are some of the successes that you're seeing in some of these different cancers, or epilepsy, or some of those diseases that are afflicting many people out there that maybe pharmaceuticals alone aren't being very successful in?
Well, when you look at cancer, it's difficult because everybody, it's a very the money in the industry is large, and people don't like for you to tell the truth about it. But when we look at the success rate of traditional treatment of cancer overall, we go back to the 70s, the rates, the cure rates have gone nowhere. They're no better. With all that money given to all these different institutions to research. Now, I know people will get, especially oncologists may get upset about that, but if you review the data in its entirety, that's what it says. Now, are there certain types of cancer that have improved with traditional treatment? Absolutely. But here's the bottom line, in my opinion. I recently, and this will illustrate it with a recent person, there was a person recently that was brought to me because I work a lot with cancer patients along with a place called Center for New Medicine, help out with there. So, because I'm not an oncologist, but I do have a good knowledge of the treatments. They had been told by their conventional doctor there was nothing else that could be done for them, and they were going to die. It was a woman that was in her early 40s, that had three children, all under the age of 10 or 11. And when presented with all the alternative things, they just still decided it was too wacky for them. So she continued with the traditional treatment and died a few weeks ago. And I just don't understand the disconnect. Again, it's the fear, just like we talked about earlier with COVID, that keeps people from thinking irrationally that, there's something about this. I even said, and a lot of people don't know this, if you need to take higher doses of THC, for cancer or everything, and you're worried about the psychoactivity and being stoned, all that. If you take it in the raw, THCA, the acidic form, does not make you high. You can get a bag of weed and blender it up with other stuff and make a drink out of it, and take high doses of THC. It will not make you high. You get high when it's decarboxylated, meaning when it's heated. So if you take TC, but it has THCA rather. It has the same medicinal benefits. So that's one thing. When people need to take higher THC levels, they can just simply take it in its raw form. It doesn't taste great, but if you're trying to help yourself with cancer or something, it matters. And there's all kinds of other treatments, that I'm sure the other doctor talked about that are done in other countries that can help in addition to cannabis for cancer. So it's one of those topics that you have to be careful about, even what you say, because people will attack you. But suffice it to say that anyone that I care about, or if it was myself, I would not go down that route in terms of traditional treatment.
Yeah, well, that's something that I've said as well. I had Jason Vale, who is a guy that does a lot of juice retreats, and he himself reversed a lot of his autoimmune disease and issues, his weight gain, all these things that he had. And again, I'm not saying you should live on juice, but when it comes to that, when you look at the China study, when you look at plant-based diets, I think there's so much power in clean nutrition for disease reversal and healing. And so when we're talking about COVID, again, you want the most resilient human body. And so I think that a lot of the cancers are caused by environmental factors, whether it's something you're breathing, something that you're consuming, whether it's drinks and foods. And then, so because of that, I think you can reverse it. But for me personally, and this is just my opinion, the idea that you take an already fragile human being and your treatment is to destroy their immune system through chemicals or radiation, that doesn't really make any sense. To me, the way that you would do it, either side by side with that treatment, or maybe even solely if people have the courage to do it, is that you use, as you said, mindful practice and nutrition and hydration and sleep to bolster that body and get back to that homeostasis where the cancer's reversed. Is that a magic pill? No, but to me, that makes a lot more sense than bombarding the human body and destroying their immune system.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's what the traditional treatments do. It's basically a race between we're going to kill all your cells and hopefully you have enough of your good cells to last. And then people that survive all that go into remission. And then what you see a few years later, it comes back. You want to get rid of it. I mean, if you go to some doctor that's going to remove some kind of go to a dentist and they're going to remove a cavity. You don't want the cavity to come back if he removes it. You're thinking that he or she removed the cavity. But with cancer, there's always this hedging that, it could come back or whatever. But if you, again, with the juicing or the clean diets, all these things are giving the body what it needs to help kill the cancer. Beta glucans, which I mentioned earlier about COVID, is a thing that people are taking in big doses for cancer. It's another treatment. Exosomes. There's the list goes on and on and on that most people haven't heard of that can really help with this. And the bottom line is that the people that really fail some of the alternative therapies are people that have had their immune system so destroyed by the conventional treatment that there's really not a whole lot left to work with at that point. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. Some places like Center for New Medicine in Irvine, which they're the best, in my opinion, Dr. Keneally over there, they sometimes use chemotherapy, but it's usually, when they use it, it's very low dose. People aren't losing their hair and throwing up and all that. They use it in tiny amounts, sometimes just preliminary to get something aggressive under control. But they put people on vegan diets and all kinds of things almost, from day one, because you want to put all the resources the body has into battling and getting rid of the cancer. Well, one thing to think about is a couple statements that are going to shock people. CBD and THC have both been shown to kill cancer cells. Not just some, but all cancer cells have been exposed to. You can even go on YouTube and see time lapse videos of cancer cells, human cancer cells, with exposed to THC or CBD die, and then the normal cells don't die. So if you think about cancer from that way, if there's mechanisms that can kill the cancer cell only, but not your good cells, it's just like an infection. And I know that it's being simplistic, and there's been all kinds of treatments in past years. When you think about, apricot seeds and amygdalin and all this stuff that were outlawed, and this is junk science and everything else. But when you really read what was going on with that stuff, and there's people that still do that. I mean, I chew them myself, apricot seeds. Again, I'm trying to be preemptive. When you look at the mechanisms of how these things work, specifically on cancer cells, then you could see that there is science to that. And then all the millions of people that have their own story. But here's the thing that is probably the most haunting thing that was for me, and this occurred probably almost 9-10 years ago when we were finishing American Addict, the very first film. And I remember I woke up and I thought to myself, almost everything I've been told is a lie. And I also came to the realization that when I say people, I really mean the big business, the big corporations, because the individuals that work at pharmaceutical companies and the FDA and all this, they're good people. They're trying to do the right thing, but they're working in a vacuum. They don't often know the ultimate agenda at the top. And so what I've seen is that people will be allowed to suffer and die for the sake of profit. And so not letting people in on some of these other techniques that could be used instead of, or even in conjunction with conventional cancer treatments is criminal, because sometimes you need surgery for cancer. If there's a isolated tumor, maybe cut that thing out and do this and that, or maybe low dose chemo. But it's like us versus them, right? It's like, oh, everything you're being told is ridiculous. You need to get this chemo regimen and radiation and all this stuff, even though our numbers and our success rate is in the toilet. It needs to come together. It needs to be integrative. That's the key.
Absolutely. Well, I wrote about the observation in the book I wrote last year, and just through a medic's eyes is, I ask everyone now listening, if they're a medical profession, think about all the codes that you lose. They all have a sack full of medication, statins and, blood pressure, other blood pressure medications and water pills and all these things. Tens of thousands of dollars worth of meds are taking, every single day, and they didn't work. The person was 45, 50, 55, and they still died. So like you said, it's not that these people wake up every day plotting to take American lives, but this system has devolved to the point where we have disease management that doesn't improve life. There isn't, hey, I'm going to give you this blood pressure medication, and in, 2 months' time, we're going to do this diet plan, and we're going to get you off these meds. It's not. You're a lifetime addict. And I think that's the same lens of a lot of these diseases. If we're just relying on drugs and there's no improvement of overall resilience and overall health, then you have to question yourself, is that, ultimately what doctors and nurses and medics are supposed to be doing? And, I have some great medicines in, drugs in my drug box that are phenomenal. I've seen people, defibrillated and arrhythmias changed, and Narcan taking someone out of an opioid overdose. So there are some amazing drugs out there, but the chronic disease management drugs, I think, are the areas that we have allowed people to think that it's a pharmaceutical answer, when it's not. It's a holistic health answer that we need to be looking at.
That's right. The best way to get people better is to stop them from getting sick in the first place. And in this country, we are fantastic at emergency medicine, at surgeries, at high-tech things, acute problems. No problem. No, if you have a heart attack and you need emergency surgery, no place you'd rather be in the world than here. If you need to call the EMT, best place ever. They're here like that. They help people. It's the chronic illnesses that we are an abject failure. We consistently rank last or near last in every health indicator of all the industrialized countries. And this has been going on for the last 10, 15 years. Consistently, every year that Coltrane study comes out, we're last or next to last in every category, because it's all chronic things. And it's a very unbelievable profit center to treat people this way, where they get sick, they stay sick, but they don't die. They linger for years refilling those medications. One of the first things I ask people when I have someone that comes to me for the first time, and I'll look at all these medications and I'll ask them a couple questions. Says, are they helping you? And well, I need my gabapentin, and I need my oxycodone. I'm like, well, why do you need it? Well, because if I don't take it, and they describe withdrawal effects. And I said, well, how bad is your pain right now? And they're, oh, it's horrific. I can't do this. I can't walk more than 5 minutes. I can't drive a car. And I said, so what you're telling me is that your condition is severe despite the fact that you're taking all these medications. So I try and get them to see early on that would they rather, for me personally, if my pain is a 7 or 8 out of 10 all the time and I can't sit more than 5 minutes, or I can't walk upstairs, and if I've got all these problems, I'd rather be off the medicines feeling that way than on them, because if you have all these problems and you're on the medication, you're dealing with your problems and the side effects of the medications and sitting there taking pills all the time. So the emphasis on preventative care is real preventative care, not some of the stuff that's been put in me, but the real prevention in terms of good nutrition and all that, and exercise is de-emphasized, and chronic disease is treated with pharmacy. we live in a society where we have people around a bad environment. They eat horrific food. I think food is worse than the medicine. They get sick, they go to the doctors and they get medicine, and it's a revolving door. It's a circle, and they just get sicker and sicker and sicker. And that's what we see unfold every day in front of our eyes.
Yeah. And just to be fair, sometimes I feel like I'm bashing doctors, and I'm not at all. And obviously you're a doctor, but I think, we've created an environment as well where we get patients walking in that demand that pill they saw on TV. They told me on the TV, ask my doctor for, I can't get an erection. Oh, I think it's the fact that you're obese. No, I just need this pill. Rather than actually being told, what, this lack of erection is a terrifying precursor to heart disease. So you don't need a pill. You need, a salad and a run is what you need. Ask your wife.
That's right.
So
no, you can bash. I bash doctors all the time because sometimes they need to be bashed. But one thing I think is very important for people to understand is that the way that physicians are trained and continually trained, they become tools of the system more than thinking. It's not like 56 years ago where the doctors really could use their own personal judgment. And I'm talking about doctors that are hospital based and in large medical organizations where you don't have, there's like, this is the way we do it type of mentality, as opposed to, private practitioners that they're probably in private practice because they want to be able to do things differently, the way they feel he or she feels they should be done. But you're sort of trained to do things in a certain way. And so what happens when people go to these doctors, even though some of the doctors are completely have all their heart into it and their best wishes, but if your information and what you're taught is not the best system and best information, you're going to just give that bad information with even more heart and more passion, but still the same poor outcomes. So the physicians need to be re-educated. On our bottles, it says, always consult your physician before whatever. And that's the hardest statement for me to ever have put on a bottle, because I know for a fact that the majority of physicians in this country don't know anything about CBD. Nothing. And so a lot of times when people don't know anything, they'll just say, don't take it, it's bad, or you shouldn't take it with your medication. It could be, and so they'll tell them things because they don't even know, so they'll just tell them that, because instead of just being honest to say, I'm not sure. And the fact of the matter is CBD is safe with prescription medications. I mean, I've used it on people who were taking 15, 20 medications all at the same time when they first came to me. Not an issue. There's been these things put on TV, on the national television, that there's drug interactions and that it has an effect on suppressing enzymes, which could give you a drug overdose. And on a bench level, it's true that there's some suppression sometimes of P450 enzymes, but you'd have to take mega doses. I've never seen it clinically. And that they're also not saying is there's other drugs that do the same thing to P450. And then finally, if I ever did encounter, I've given CBD to thousands and thousands of people with every disease process you could think of, most of them with multiple problems at the same time. And if I ever saw someone that had an issue with their drug level going up, that's actually good news to me. I would just reduce their drug level. If it's making the drug metabolize slower, then they need actually less pharmaceutical. So it's a non-issue, but this is the kind of half-truths that are told to the public to scare them from taking something that could really help them.
Yeah. Well, it's like you were saying as well with the drug testing. People are like, oh, what if it shows up in the test? I'm like, testing for CBD, not THC, cannabinoids that exist in your body is like testing for red blood cells. Would you get fired if they found red blood cells in your body? I mean, it's, we're not talking about a controlled substance. We're talking about something that's completely, allowed and it even has a version within the human body. So, but they have people so scared. It's the devil's lettuce. No, it's not. The devil doesn't even eat lettuce. He eats cheeseburgers.
That's right.
But anyway, well, you mentioned on American Addict. So your first one was on the opioid crisis. Second one was more towards psych meds. So tell me about American Addict 3 and then also American Weed that you're working on.
Well, American Weed was supposed to come out this past year, and we were about 75% done with it in early 2020. And we all know what happened after that. Everything shut down, production shut down. So we just sort of resumed that in the last few weeks. So we're hoping to see that come out at the end of this year. And American Ad 3, we're going to begin. So we basically have lost a year, because what I'm saying would have happened this year. American Ad 3 is supposed to start production now, and now we're talking about starting American Ad 3 production in early 2022. And there is so much to cover. It is beyond belief. But we have some ideas of how to cover it in a different slant. One of the things I'm emphasizing, and before we get too short on time, if we are, let me know. I want to focus more and more on solutions, because for years I was so passionate and going on all kinds of programs and ringing the bell about all these problems. And then I realized that sometimes you give more power to something when you just talk about it all the time, even though you're trying to help people. Just mentioning it, you need to give people solutions. So both these films are going to talk about what a person can do at an individual level for themselves, and to start to take maybe some effect from a political standpoint if they so choose to. So that's what's happening with those two films, and I love it, and I can't wait for those things to be done and come out.
Beautiful. So when are we looking at American Weed being released?
Probably end of the year, November, December of this year.
Brilliant.
If we don't have more lockdowns.
Well, I hope not. I just saw that the UK Prime Minister was supposed to be doing some talk on pulling those poor people out of their lockdown again. But just quickly, as a side note, I hear over and over and over again that there's next to no flu cases. Now, for me, I'm assuming that just means they're not testing for flu anymore. But what is your stance or your perspective on this spike that we're seeing again, purely being the entire kind of flu family, as with every winter?
Yeah, I could go way down the rabbit hole in this, but it's pretty clear that the statistics have been skewed to COVID, because all of a sudden no one's getting pneumonia or the flu anymore. It's all COVID. And there's a lot of things behind this. Hospitals get money for all kinds of things, but they've gotten big chunks of money for COVID diagnosis and COVID deaths and this. So you see people getting tested for COVID no matter what they come in the hospital for. Now, if we did the same thing for influenza A, we'd probably have bigger numbers, because so many people have already been contracted or been exposed to influenza A that we would probably nearly all test positive. But no one's testing for that, right? Because it's not in the news. But you could go to the hospital because you fell off a building, or you got in a car accident, or you're having problems with your blood pressure, and they get a COVID test. So if they pass away, if they have a problem, then it's COVID or COVID related. And this is where the numbers are very skewed. I mean, right now, as of this morning, the last Johns Hopkins update, about 500,000 deaths in this country. And again, that's a decimal point, 0.001% of the population. And meanwhile, no one's talking about how many people have died from other respiratory diseases, because everyone's scared of COVID. So that is, in my opinion, a scare tactic. What was the other second part of your question? I hung up on that.
No. I think that was it. I mean, I forget where I was even going with it now, but I mean, that's what I've seen, we were talking about coming out of lockdown. That's what it was. But yeah, so that's what I've seen as well is, there's no question. One of my friends, one of my old crew in California had COVID. It scared the hell out of him. Now he had some stuff going on prior as well. So it's funny when we talk about, this young person was, this person was this age and they got COVID. Well, there's also the chronological versus physiological age. You can be, as we know, a 35-year-old man who's in terrible, shape physically, or you can be, and my grandmother's 103 and she's still going strong, and they've had COVID exposures twice in their nursing home. So, wow. Again, just some of these numbers and some of these things that are coming out of it, I think they're just very, very, unfair. And it's absolutely a thing. Like I said, I've got friends that, he and another firefighter I work with was intubated. So it's a real thing. But again, like you said, is it to the magnitude that we have to shut down the entire planet for it? And I personally think no. I think we should have done, an aggressive slowdown at the beginning in the densely populated cities and control borders in countries. And then that way you can open it up, like Guernsey, like New Zealand, like all these countries that seem to have made strong choices at the beginning and then move forward.
Well, like you said, it is a real thing, but so is pneumonia, and so is diabetes, and so is obesity. These things are epidemics. It's killing masses of people every year, and no one's shut down or done anything for them. And so it's been politicized to the maximum. If I could, I really want to make sure I want to give some people some things they can personally do to help themselves, because this is a difficult time. I think it's very important. And I just have a short list if you let me.
We got plenty of time. Please don't make it short.
Okay. Well, I said a few of these things earlier, but as I said, I think that there's about 9 or 10 things here. And the first thing is to take control of your emotional and physical health, is to still your mind every day. This is meditation, deep breathing, yoga, and I'm talking about not the super physical yoga, but even the yoga in a chair. These are all ways to still your mind. Deep breathing, it's great for your emotion. The next thing is to stop watching network television, especially the news. Even the sitcoms and the shows are full of little subliminal messages and propaganda, sort of to people get normalized to wearing a mask all the time. The commercials are doing the same thing. So watch comedies, watch movies in a situation where there's no commercials, and try and watch things that uplift your mood instead of being negative. All the things that we see on network TV and coming out of Hollywood, if you notice how many films and everything, it's just always violence and murder and kidnappings and rape. It's just amazing that if you go on Netflix or Hulu or whatever and just look at the movies, they're so skewed towards that. And why? Because people sort of are addicted to hearing the bad news and the fear, and that stuff sells. But insulate yourself from that. I'm not saying you can't, watch the next blockbuster movie that has some violence in it. I'm not one of those people that says don't watch any of it, but keep it in perspective. It affects your mood, it affects your body, it affects your mind. And then I talk about the supplements that people just email to info@redpillmedical.com. And I'll I'm sure I can share this with you so they can. I'll send them the immune boosting regimen that can help them, that we spoke a little bit about earlier. People need to exercise 4 to 6 days a week if possible. And I really think that strength training, weight training is very important, not just aerobic stuff, especially, in women, helps with the bones and all that. Talk to people about going out in nature as frequent as possible, but at least once a week. And when you go outside, even if you're just walking to your car, look up at the sky. It's amazing how people will walk around for weeks, months, and never look up. Just look up at the sky, look at the clouds, appreciate the beauty, appreciate the sun, appreciate the birds that are flying overhead. These kind of things reconnect you with yourself, and that's appreciating things on a daily basis. And I think that going along that is realizing that we are all connected. And I have to remind myself of this, because sometimes when I'm out in public and I see people wearing 3 and 4 masks and the gloves and all this, and they're in a car, I just want to scream at them and say, "What are you doing?" But then I realize that we're all connected, in a quantum and a spiritual way, and you just sort of have to love those people anyway, and realize that is their reality, because that reality for that person is that they need to do that. So for them at that moment, that's the best. But I think if you live by example, we can help some of these people come out of that. And then the other thing is becoming more politically active. And the old-fashioned writing of letters to your mayors, governors, congressmen, and all that actually has some effect. Starting a petition, I want to announce, I actually started a petition yesterday. It's already got a decent amount of signatures, and I'll give you the link for that. But it's an iPetition for getting health insurance carriers to give coverage for CBD, because one of the biggest problems with CBD is cost, because good CBD can cost can get up there in terms of money, especially people that have chronic pain, severe pain, because they often need much bigger doses. I have chronic pain patients that need to take 400, 800 milligrams a day. That gets really pricey. Insurance should cover this. So, James, I will send you the link. Maybe you could post it, because if people could come and it's free, they just sign the petition. This is one of the things that I'm doing to try and help push forward that we start getting benefits for people that are struggling to pay their insurance premiums. And then it doesn't pay for anything that actually keeps them healthy. It just pays for medications. So it needs we need to get some political pressure to have CBD covered by health insurance companies. Yeah. So that's all I have for that. Yeah.
No, I'll put the link on the webpage for this episode, and I'll put it out when I air the episode on social media as well. But I think that actually kind of segues to a good point that I've observed now. We're a year into this. It's funny, I've seen some kind of tongue-in-cheek memes saying, "Does anyone, I need some fashion ideas for what I'm going to wear for the 1 year anniversary of 14 days to slow the curve."
Yeah. That's funny.
But joking apart, if it's lives that we care about, then where is the initiative to stop spraying our food with chemicals, stop treating our animals like, stock in a factory warehouse, to serve healthy food to kids and make sure that PE is put back into all programs? If we really care about health, all those have been put in. But a year from now, none of that has. So whether it's CBD, whether it's chiropractic, all these prevention measures should absolutely be supported by insurance companies, because not only will they save money, but I've never seen a police officer die because he touched CBD, but I've seen a shitload of them die because they touched fentanyl, So there's a very real, deadly reason to also support holistic things like this, because especially the uncontrolled illicit drugs, and that's a whole nother conversation about drug prohibition in this country, but, allowing the criminals to have access to all those drugs is killing so many of our people, causing so much violence on the street. So the more proactive, holistic elements that we have, the less of that stuff is going to be around, the less people we're going to die. I've lost 3 firefighters personally to overdoses, and I know that they, at least 2 of them turned to heroin because they weren't able to get prescription opiates anymore. So, CBD literally would have saved their lives.
Yeah, it's hard to see when people that should still be here aren't here because of things like this. And, there's a simple reason why all these other things we talk about aren't emphasized, because it just simply doesn't fit the narrative of what the agenda is. And that's really the key here. And this is why there has to be some political action, because the people that are supposedly representing us have to know that they can get removed. I mean, you see here in California, I'm pretty sure they're almost have enough signatures to try and have Gavin Newsom put out of office. I mean, people need to know that there is some consequences, because I think that the governments in general, they don't have responsibility for their actions. They certainly don't have fiscal responsibility. Like, if you or I blow our money, playing slot machines in Vegas, and then you can't pay your bills, there's a consequence. You're personally paying for that. But when the government blows all of our money, on something, they just tax or find another way or print more money. So the people that are making some of these decisions they're insulated from the consequences. And I think that's the biggest problem. So you need real people that have lived through some of these consequences that go into some political power positions that really have people's best interests at heart, because it's still not happening. And, it's a whole conversation of what happened in the political landscape recently. But we need to have people that really represent people to get some of these things like coverage for CBD and other things that really help keep people healthy. You need better people in office to do that.
Absolutely. People are going to get their heckles up a little bit, but I always point out it's not left or right. We've had an obesity epidemic growing for decades. So that's both sides of the fence are responsible for this. So I think our system is broken. There are so many pockets that are filled with special interest groups that are contributing to the deaths of Americans and British and, other Western countries. So we need people, whatever their political persuasion, that actually have the health of this country as their main priority.
Yeah. And again, I hate to belabor the point, but people that are healthy are not profitable. And I think that's the reality that we have to look at and understand why some of the things have happened. And I don't, again, when I've said so many things in the past, I'll get people that are upset with me that work for a pharmaceutical company or then they're saying you're bashing. And I don't. I do believe there are a lot, like you said, there are a lot of medications that are great. And I think and I've talked to so many people that work in these organizations and they are good people trying to do the right thing. But I think when you're in the upper echelons in the boardroom and people are looking at profit and losses and trying to be beholden to shareholders and things like that, there are decisions made and information that's omitted or just suppressed that would affect the bottom line. And that's when it hurts the masses of people out there. And that's what has to stop.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Well, that we talked about the documentaries. I just want to say as well to everyone listening. So you also have a book, CBD, What You Need to Know. So tell me where people can find that so they can learn more about CBD and endocannabinoids.
Well, there's an ebook that I give to people for free. So when you put the thing, the email address and all that, when you post that, I can have that sent out to them. The book that will be for that will cost money also got delayed because of COVID, and so I'm going to have an update on that. But there's so many things that sort of came to an end. It's really weird for me personally. Last March was a big month in terms of things that were going on for me personally and business wise, and they all got canceled out because it was all happening in March. There's so many things I had planned. I was flying to New York to do a big distribution deal for the company in mid-March, and everything just got canceled. And so some of the things I'm telling people to do, I practice what I preach, because I was really upset and down over this whole thing for a while. And then, you realize, look, this is an opportunity. Everything happens for a reason, and really just turn this all around and look at the good side of the lockdown, so to speak, that the some people that's been able to really reconnect with their children and their family and be at home more and realize that you don't have to do, 2-hour day commutes, and the advent of more people working from home, I think that was a trend that was moving, but I think we got a trend that would have taken maybe 10 years to happen literally overnight because of this. So I try and look at the good parts of it. But yeah, that book was delayed.
Yeah, no, I think the efficiency side is great. And, I think about especially LA, the people that sat in, I-5 or some of the other horrendous freeways for hours and hours to go sit in a cubicle now realize that they can do exactly the same thing and spend another 2 or 3 hours with their kids, which is amazing.
Absolutely. And the lack of the less pollution. You probably remember they were showing the videos of different parts of the world and the before and after 2 weeks of no one being outside and the animals coming out and seeing things clearly. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. And so there's things that there's value, I think, at least at the beginning, to just getting everybody off the merry-go-round of life and just to stop for a minute and really think about it. But the wheels came off of that philosophy once we were, 4, 5, 6, 7 months into this, like enough is enough. But I think at the beginning, it was actually a good thing for a lot of reasons, not so much COVID, because I don't think it did a whole lot, but I think for just having people take stock of their lives, really sitting down and thinking about their lives, spending time with their family, really understanding what's important in life. So that was very helpful.